All right, cool. Looks like we're live. All right, so we got Gordon from Texas, Harry in Oklahoma's on board, and again, everybody, we got Andrew Biggs from the beautiful West Coast, and he's joining us tonight. He gave up drumming. He likes to play drumming and guitar. He said, "I will jump on this live stream to talk Social Security because playing drumming, that's boring compared to talking Social Security and whatever, man." And Andrew, you said you got an article coming out in the Wall Street Journal here on Friday, you said?
Yeah, I thought it was supposed to come out yesterday, but they pushed it back to Friday. So it's just looking at, there's been stories recently, surveys say you need $1.5 million to retire, but it's really looking at what people actually have and how they feel about things. And, the answer is you don't need $1.5 million or anything close to it. It's really, people are doing a lot better than, the media would have you think.
Let me just for a second, take a left turn here or right, whatever you want to say. But I was watching this video from your friend Teresa
Gilliard.
Yeah. And I just like, why is she, and I know I ask you this every single time, but I'm just like, does she not know the history of the pensions? And I just don't, and I don't want to ask you to put you on the spot. She was on this video of basically it was Vox, we all know Vox is left wing, but I was like, why is this permeating? So I just don't get it. So Teresa's argument was that we all had pensions back then. You couldn't touch your money. And it's just not true. And there's this guy, I just don't get it, man. I'm like, that's just not the case. It's kind of like, wait, I'll put it to you in a way that might be of interest because I got a lot of engineers on my channel. Like solar energy, right? So photovoltaic is turning the sun's energy into electricity. That's photovoltaic. Well, we have these solar plants, and they have what's called nameplate capacity, and so they'll say we can produce 100 gigawatts of electricity, but that's not actually the production. You have 100 gigawatts as the nameplate capacity, but you're only producing about 15% of that in a solar plant. And and that's what I feel about these people who argue pensions. They say all these people had access to pensions, but very few people actually had the pension because they didn't stay at the job till they're 65 and all that stuff. I just don't. Do these people not know that, Andrew? It's crazy.
No, well, yeah, the data on that stuff is interesting. If you at the peak of participation in defined benefit pensions for the private sector was, I think, 1974, and at that point it was 39% of private sector workers participated in a plan. But there was a study done by the Senate Labor Committee in the early 70s.
Yes, that's right.
And they found out literally 9 out of 10 people participated in a pension didn't collect a benefit. So if you go to maybe making 80 or so SSA, Social Security, I worked there for a while, and they did a survey of new retirees, and only 27% had any pension income of any kind. And if you look at people at the bottom half, the income distribution is probably nothing. So right. It's the issue with it's a strange thing because somebody like say Teresa Gilliard, very nice woman. I can talk to her, enjoy it, and all that, and smart. And so you say, okay, how does this happen? To be frank, I think a lot of these people is they've chosen their conclusion.
Yes.
The conclusion the retirement system we have today does not work. Retirees are not doing well. Future retirees will be doing worse. And therefore we need to either replace it or expand Social Security or whatever. And to be frank, the conclusion is what it is, and they pick evidence that makes the conclusion appear compelling. And with some people, you can imagine they're just they see data or they have anecdotes or whatever. Yeah. Teresa's a tenured professor. She knows, and so it's I don't know how else to put it, but they're just using it's the standard of negligence for I think legal things is you either know or should know that you're doing something wrong, and for most of these guys that's where it is now. They know or should know.
It's the error of omission. You know what I'm saying? They're just omitting that. I actually read that the Senate labor study. I did a couple of videos on it because it's wonderful. It's like, I'd love to get the actual hard copy book, but it's a wonderful read And they talked about this guy, a bunch of guys who literally lost their pensions. I think it was A&P, in the old A&P grocery stores. They had a pension, and then one day they didn't because their company went, either kaput or the union took.
70s, this is probably 74, so I've got it somewhere. NBC did this kind of expose about pensions, called Pensions, the Broken Promise.
Yes.
This is the system that they all tell you, hey, you want this. And it was all basically the people were getting screwed because the employers would say you got a pension, then they had vesting rules, like you have to have 20 years on the job and be age 60 or you get zero.
Right.
So it's, that's difficult. And then if you're working for, I don't know, Bethlehem Steel or Studebaker or whatever, they go under. They did enough rules forcing them to fund the pension. So if your employer goes under, then you're done. So between the two, that's why they're calling it the broken promise. But what happened was in 74, Congress passed a bill called ERISA, which regulated these pensions and said, okay, you can't have these crazy vesting rules anymore, and you got to do more of a job of funding your pensions. That kind of gave us what we have today.
Yeah.
As soon, literally, like flipping a switch, as soon as that happened, coverage of defined benefit pensions, the private sector started to decline. 74, when ERISA passed, was the high point. It started going down. And what that told you is if you actually made the employers fund the pension and paid benefits to people who participated, they weren't willing to do it anymore. It just wasn't worth it to them as a way to attract and retain employees. So they still, employers pay as much into retirement plans today as they did back then, but it was just the form of a DB pension. It's a huge financial risk for an employer. It's a big legal liability and all that. It just wasn't worth it. So it's kind of, if you look at a DB pension today, if you have one, it's okay because the vesting rules are all that. Right. But the only situation under which employers were, at least at some limited scale, willing to offer them is because it was a crappy pension. And so but the thing is, and this is the tough thing about sort of the retirement discussion. If I go to conferences and you're talking to like legit economists or policy people or pension experts, who get published in peer-reviewed journals, they know all this stuff. None of this is any secret of how these pensions work in America. Everybody knows it. But then you get this stuff, back in the day we had this pension, and frankly, it's BS. And it's really, I write occasionally for Forbes, and in recent stuff, I just have kind of taken the gloves off a bit because I'm just tired of
exactly.
It's just, what I said a couple times is there are experts out there who use the facts honestly, who disagree with me. So just because I know the data and the history and the facts doesn't mean I'm right. But it's just, if you're going into a debate and you're not using the data in an honest way, and I really think that is where we are right now on this. People deserve better than that. I may be right, I may be wrong, but we deserve a debate where we're presenting actual facts and we're presenting them in non-misleading ways. And most of the retirement debate you'll see in the U.S. right now it's not conducted in that way at all. Your Bernie Sanders guys, or it's just terrible.
It's weird too, because they hate the 401k. And I'm like, in my opinion, I'm not saying I'm right here, but I kind of think I am. The 401k was the most liberating thing financially that there's ever been. If I was under the old rules, I would never have been able to start my business. The 401k is what allowed me to put my seed capital essentially to start my business. It's a very risky thing. I was, under the age of 59 and a half, so I had to pay a 10% penalty on my distribution plus income tax. But man, this idea that the 401k is broken and the pension system was better, I'm like, it's just wrong. I wish we all had more money in our I wish I had more money in my 401k. You know what I'm saying? But the idea that it's like fundamentally flawed, and that's that Vox video that Therese was on.
It's the simple fact, and it's what I guess is, there's data on this, and so it's just, if I'm saying something, I don't want to just give you all the footnotes for it, but just trust me, there's data on this. But the simple fact is, more people are saving more for retirement today than ever before in the past. More people, if you go back to the peak of DB pensions was 39% of people were offered a plan. You look in BLS data for the private sector for the last years, 70% of people are offered a retirement plan. Yeah. So, and your participation is going up because of auto enrollment and all that. The fees are down. The contributions are much higher, because back in the day of DB pensions, the employer paid in, the employee didn't. Now they both pay in. So if you look at contributions as a percentage of wages, they're up 50% or something versus what they were before. So it's this whole thing, the retirement crisis stuff. Oh, we're not saving enough. I mean, Jesus, you just look at like Federal Reserve data, you can see retirement savings. They're kind of moving up, slow and steady from 1950, about 1975, 1980. Once you hit the 80s, there's clearly a break in the pattern, because people really started saving at that point. So savings as a percentage of wages is a way of thinking about it. How much do I have if wages have to replace? Are they freaking 5 times higher today than the mid 70s? I mean, it's whatever you may say, oh, I don't like this or that about the 401k. When you've got 5 times more savings, you can make a lot of mistakes and still get away with it. And that's kind of how, if you look at retirees today, everybody expects, people have been predicting this retirement crisis for 20 years. And you would expect, okay, these retirements, aren't we miserable by now?
Right.
They're happy and getting happier. They're financially secure and getting financially secure. It's just that they have this entire narrative they've been literally spinning for 2 decades. And the press is generally very compliant on this thing. But it's the actual retirees, and the data simply refuse to cooperate with them, because it's the picture in the data is simply not at all compatible with what they're saying. It just doesn't work for them.
So I'm looking forward to your article then. So if everybody, Andrew's article will be in the Wall Street Journal on Friday, and I'm sure I'll do a video on it, because I do subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, and I don't subscribe because the Wall Street Journal is kind of lefty on the news reporting. Their opinion section has always been the Wall Street Journal's gold mine, but the news section has always been pretty lefty. But so look forward to that article in the Wall Street Journal. And Andrew, keep taking your gloves off too, unfortunately, because it's kind of like people say, the average median person can't buy a house anymore, and I'm like, all right, so let's look at the size of the median house today versus the size of the median house 40 years ago. 40 years ago, it's about 1,400, 1,500 square feet. Today, it's about 2,400 square foot. And yet the family size has dropped significantly. So let's put this into perspective. The houses has grown by, that's 50%. The family size has shrunk by 50%. Something is happening in terms of people's expectations, man. And I'm not sitting there thinking it's easy, but I'm just saying, come on, man. Let's
if nobody could afford a house, the house would be sitting empty. Which they're not. It's one of my favorite little factoids. Is you get this survey question where they'd ask people, if you had an emergency, a $400 emergency, could you afford to pay it? It comes out of a Federal Reserve survey, and the Fed's actual question is reasonable, but it gets interpreted that all these people, Americans, couldn't afford a $400 surprise bill. And there's an economist at MIT, and he said, look, if that were true, the nation's highways will be strewn with broken down cars. And they're not. And so it's all you have to do is, you with a lot of the stuff, you kind of have to trust your eyes in the sense of, I was in Hawaii a couple of weeks ago for vacation. I live in Oregon, so that's the Florida for people on the West Coast. But we're in Kauai, which is, one of the more expensive islands there. And I'm down by the pool, and I'm talking to a guy, and it turns out you'd think he's not like an investment bank or something. He's a retired plumber from Connecticut.
Right.
So this guy was a plumber. He, I wouldn't fly that far to go to Hawaii, but he's like, I'm going to fly 5,000 miles, sit in Hawaii for a couple of weeks, and he's a plumber. And retired school teachers and things like that. America's just a lot richer, at least in retirement, than you think they are. And so that's just, trust your eyes when you look around on this stuff.
100%, man. All right, so guys, if you guys got questions, put them in caps for sure. We do have a question. I want to start off with Andrew, and then I want to dive into the Republican study group thing. Andrew, this is just a guy. He's not a lady, he's a guy, he says. Do you believe illegal immigration's impact on Social Security will lower average wage index and therefore lower the COLA of those under the age of 62? So he's basically saying that the illegal immigrants are bringing down this is his claim, and I'm not agreeing or disagreeing, but this is his claim. The illegal immigrants are bringing down wages. That's what bring down the average wage index, and that could affect your Social Security.
Okay. Yeah, you got a couple of different things. The basics in general are illegal immigration is good for Social Security, broadly speaking. Legal immigration, not so good. And the reason for that is most illegal immigrants, they're not paid in cash. They actually have, some fake Social Security number. And so most of them do, in fact, pay payroll taxes, but it's very hard for them to collect benefits. I don't think it's impossible. It used to be if you left the country, you could collect, but that's been kind of squashed. So by and large, illegal immigrants pay taxes, don't collect benefits. You get that dynamic. Then there's the question, okay, would illegal immigration, or just, I guess you'd say low wage immigration in general, lower wages, and then it could, in theory. This is a very hotly debated thing. I'm not an expert on that issue. There really is a lot of debate back and forth, but it's always the immigration stuff is framed in, do immigrants lower the wages of people who are sort of substitutes for immigrants?
Right.
Exactly. Existing immigrants, or low-skilled native-born workers. I could buy that they do a little bit. Isn't enough to hit average wages overall. I just don't think it's significant. So I think on net, illegal immigration is a positive for Social Security financially. Doesn't mean you should say we should have illegal immigration. Right. Just to, it's not that big a positive, but I think that's not. In general, people say, "Oh, immigration is good for Social Security or whatever." It's, in some sense, it is, but it's not so good that should drive your policy decisions. Whatever other reasons you have on immigration, that's kind of what you should be thinking about, I think.
Yeah, and the numbers speak for themselves. The average wage index has grown even with a massive amounts of immigration, legal or otherwise. So it's grown above the rate of inflation. So there's been a significant increase in Social Security benefits because
Social Security benefits are a lot higher today.
100%. And so it's again, I was talking to my brother about this because he's a data scientist. We're like, we just like the data. You know what I'm saying? We can argue all day long about the theories, but when the data's, it's funny, Andrew. He's talking about some of these people he's worked with. I'm not going to get into it too deep, but there's like millions of dollars at stake, and people are just going off hunches. And he goes, you shouldn't be committing millions of dollars to a hunch. You should have some data backing this stuff. You know what I'm saying? So, and like, if there's no data backing your claim, and I'm not saying this guy who asked that question is saying this, but I'm just saying there's no data backing that. Let's not make policy decisions until we can see some actual hard data. And the data's, I still think, is very favorable in terms of the average wage index increasing with Social Security.
It's gone up. So it's, the very specific question is, even with the data, is really, really tough to answer. There's no obvious, you have to look for little quirks and experiments and stuff like that. But probably the effects are not large either way.
Let's jump into, so I want to ask you, I want to show you, I'm going to present something here real quick on the, oh, wait, can I not do this? Wait. I can't present my share screen. There we go, sweet. I want to start with the Republican study, and Andrew had written an article on this, guys. There we go, sweet. Can you see that? I probably should have put I forgot to do that. So about a month or so, 3 weeks ago, you had written an article. I think it was AE. I can't remember, about the Republican Study Committee's Social Security proposal. And I can't remember where I saw that, but a couple of things I just want to talk about here. The Republican Study Committee's budget and spending task force cannot be more clear We will not now or ever support cutting or delaying retirement benefits for any senior in or near retirement. All right, so they're saying it very explicitly in one regard, and then kind of lackadaisical in another, that they're not going to cut or delay retirement benefits for anyone in retirement or near retirement. Part two is they would make modest changes to PIA. They're going to make modest changes to PIA benefit formula for individuals who are not near retirement and earn more than the wealthiest PIA benefit factor. It would also make modest adjustments to the retirement age for future retirees to account for increases in life expectancy. And finally, for these individuals, it limit or phase out auxiliary benefits for high-income earners. So my problem with all that, Andrew, is that they're leaving it completely subjective as to who is near retirement. There we go. So that's what I want to do. And like, what does that mean? I mean, you might not know. I don't know. But why would they?
Well,
like, who is near retirement? I'm 53. Am I considered near retirement? Probably not. I don't know. And then they're saying the highest PIA. I mean, right now the highest PIA is about $3,800 a month if you had the max benefits for the total 35 years. That's not a huge amount of so. I mean, it's
oh yeah, okay. The general comment of why are they being vague about it? They're being vague about it because it's a difficult political issue, and to be frank, the leader of their own party is against them on it. So they're trying to inch in what they see as the right direction. Often you don't give as many details. They know when they've figured out these numbers. They know what the number would be.
Right.
But it's just they're trying to lay out a foundation in principles, not trying to lay out a specific plan. So it's, when I worked in the Bush White House in 2005 when he did the Social Security stuff, and then he was saying anybody 55 and over wouldn't be affected. 20 years later, it gets really, really expensive to do. And so it's, I like what it's essentially they're saying, okay, we're going to index the retirement age for longevity. So when that happens, I don't know, because they're saying we won't affect people near retirement. Let's say that starts 10 years from now. And so it inch up by a month a year or something.
Right.
Or month every other year. Their thing of limiting benefits in the high end, that it's looking at with Social Security, these bend points, under a certain amount, and I just can't remember if it's $800 a month.
1,100 is the first bend point. Yeah,
okay, that's what it is. So I'm getting old now. I remember it was like 600. But okay, that's because the AWI went up. But okay, beneath that you get a 90% replacement. Then the middle part's 32, and then above is 15. Right. I think where the 15% bend point comes in is people who had pre-retirement earnings averaging around $85,000 or something. So they're basically saying if your annual earnings were below that, you wouldn't be affected by that element of it, and they're just scaled down there. The auxiliary benefits, let's say I'm a maximum wage worker making $168, my wife doesn't work at all. Right. She would benefit equal to half my benefit,
right? Just
based on that. And again, she doesn't need it. She didn't pay for it. So, that's a no-brainer to lower those. The problem is with not much money there. My guesstimate is, and this gives you an idea of how difficult Social Security is, that, they were obviously nervous about putting forward these ideas, but their ideas, my guess is, would fix around 15% of the long term. Maybe they get some more. I don't know, but it's not a lot.
Let's just say it's 30%. I mean, right. I mean, even if that were the case, we're still 70% short, and they've taken this political insanity, man. It's like,
but and here's the thing, where it's just what's the alternative? The longer you go, the more likely this is to get settled with tax increases rather than benefit reductions. And to fix Social Security, the way most congressional Democrats want to do it, which is, it's fine. It's not a choice. But then you're looking at literally the largest peacetime tax increase in history, which is why I personally think when Republicans are running from this, as some prominent Republicans are, you are setting, come 2034 and the trust funds run out, you are setting your own guys up for the biggest tax increase in history.
Absolutely.
And I'm willing to pay taxes for, where it's needed. I'm not like a total libertarian or something, but if you're two sort of maximum wage workers, both making 168, you're retiring this year, you're getting a Social Security benefit of $96,000. That is 4.5 times the poverty threshold for two elderly people. This is a group that, I understand why we are where we are. I'm not saying we just arbitrarily take away the money, but if you go to 2050, that same high income couple will be getting 125 years. Is there some point at which we just say, look, we don't need to pay more and more money from the government, financed by higher and higher taxes for a purpose? There's no public purpose in providing $100,000 a year to people who are making 300. They don't. If you cut their benefits, they will simply save more. I mean, a nice example of this: you took these two high earners who are going to retire on $96,000 a year. If those same people were living in Canada, making the same money, maybe under the Canada pension plan, they get $31 a year. Now,
hold on a second. Did you all hear that? Because this is important, Andrew. I tell you, all these people say we need to be more like the UK or Canada. So if we're making $96,000 a year in Social Security here, the same Canadian benefit would be how much?
God, that's 31.
A third.
Yeah.
So all those Canadians who think they're all that in a bag of chips, they're not making crap to what and they're paying more for it too, I imagine too.
No, but here's the interesting thing is, no, they're actually paying less. Okay. And in particular, it's high income people paying less in Canada.
Really?
Their tax rate is a little lower. I mean, the 12 for the U.S. is 12.4% going to Social Security. They're a little lower than that. But here's the interesting thing: the 12.4% here goes up to $168,000. Above that, you don't pay the tax, you don't have the benefits. In Canada, it stops at somewhere around $70,000.
No kidding.
The UK stops around $70,000. So it's when you hear these people saying, "Oh, it's common sense. We should apply the payroll tax to all your earnings." Like no other country on earth practically does that.
But Andrew, I just had to interrupt you. Canada has an awesome prime minister, though.
He's a snappy dresser. But my point on the Canada thing is Canada is not littered. You don't see all these rich people living on the streets because
right.
What do? They just save more.
Right.
And so this idea, and I was testifying in the Senate maybe a month ago, and somebody, a Republican senator, pushed back on me on this. I was like, look, we don't need to be paying $96,000 a year. And he said, well, San Francisco, the cost of living is high. I'm like, that's San Francisco's problem. I mean, seriously, it's just, if you live out where 99.9% of Americans live, it's not expensive. So it's just we need some straight thinking on this stuff.
That's why Republicans can't have nice things. So the Democrats take care of their voters. The Republicans are worried about the cost of living for fools who live in San Francisco. I'm just like,
Well, Republicans, by and large, are sort of running scared of this issue. They don't know. I mean, if you went back 20 years ago, the median Republican said, I want to fix the Social Security problem as much as possible by reducing benefits rather than raising taxes. Because, I hate to tell you, those are your choices. And so they said, look, we're small government people. We want to do it progressively, keep the safety net working. We just don't need to pay higher and higher benefits to richer and richer retirees, which strikes me as sensible. Now, Trump's run away from the issue. I hate to tell you, it's not a principled stand. It's just he doesn't want to tackle it. Right. But the problem is, let's assume he wins. He is there for 4 years. So he can go through. He's saying, I'm going to do all these things. I'm not going to cut benefits. The problem is, if you don't want to cut benefits, you have to raise taxes. Democrats are willing to tell you they don't want to cut benefits. They're willing to say, oh, we'll raise this and this and this tax. Republicans are not willing to tell you. But if you're not willing to cut benefits, you are going to raise taxes in a pretty major way. And that's
you have to. It's inevitable.
It's money in, money out. And so that's what we're setting ourselves up for. And it just strikes me as not, and I'm not saying this, look, I'm a sort of conservative minded guy. So just, inside, I don't want to raise taxes, but just in a more practical sense, we don't need to be paying that much money to run a decent system. I mean, the country I've sort of model things after the most be Australia, where essentially they have a guaranteed sort of poverty level benefit. You will not retire into poverty in Australia, unlike here where you can, because Social Security doesn't have that. But then their system says, okay, over and above that, you're going to save on your own. So everybody is offered a retirement plan at work, mostly a 401k, with some people with traditional pensions. Everybody's enrolled in it, and you fall back on the government only if something goes wrong for you. So right now, Australia, so they have essentially zero poverty versus us, or 6% or whatever you want to put it. But our costs are going up and up and up. They're already paying, I think, less than half of what we are for their Social Security program, but their costs are going to go down because this system they have where everybody has a retirement plan that matures. So fewer and fewer people need the government benefit. The UK is similar to that. New Zealand is similar to that. Canada is a little different, but still much more limited. It's the government is there to help poor retirees. It's not there to help rich retirees. Yeah. If Republicans can't figure that out, then you're on board for much higher taxes. And that's just how the math works.
Yeah, but they're never going to, I mean, we're never going to go that. I mean, I hate to say never, but it's too, sorry about one of my dogs up there. We're talking about dogs before we jumped on here. So Andrew's he's taking care of well, mine are upstairs. It's just
right. Then you need to get quieter dogs.
How dare you? But the Republicans, the thing that just annoys me most is that the spousal benefit, man. I mean, the Republicans are supposed to be pro-family, Andrew. And the family, the wife stays at home to raise the children. You see what I'm saying? My wife stayed at home to raise the children. She was a bond fund analyst. Actually, when she was on Trump conference calls back in the 90s, analyzing Trump bonds, and she gave the thumbs down. And so they're saying we're going to reduce spousal and auxiliary benefits, survivor benefits to their own base. This is what I'm like sitting there thinking, are you that dumb? You don't hurt your own base because we're supposedly the pro-family party.
Yeah, this was an issue. I mean, when I was working on Social Security, I started in the late 1990s. I worked with the Cato Institute, which was very active on that at the time, and they're very, very libertarian. I mean, if you don't think there's a difference between libertarians and conservatives, go hang out at Cato.
Right.
Yeah, they're libertarian. So they're like, look, this is our problem. It's and I think they're a good case. I mean, it's. To be clear, the Republican Study Committee says we're going to limit these benefits. Right. We're not going to eliminate them. We're going to limit them. And honestly, I just can't. If money grew on trees, whatever, but it doesn't grow on trees. And so there really is a question of why you should be paying some of those benefits. But even at the time, back 20, 25 years ago, there's pushback from the social conservative part. Right. Where like this helps, it makes it easier for the wife to stay at home, blah blah blah. Yeah, by and large, it's not a very well targeted benefit.
Let's talk about.
It's not a lot of money though. So.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly. I mean, like you go where the votes are, said Richard Nixon. You go where the money is. So I mean,
probably they felt they need to fill out the plan. If they had two things, okay, we're going to lower benefits for high-income people and raise the retirement age. It doesn't sound like much.
Right.
So I suspect the spousal thing was filler. It was just, it's not going to give you very much money, not going to do very much, but hey, we got a 3-point plan.
Yeah, but it's bad politics. This is my thing. It's like you still have to win politically, and the Republicans are, because they're so vague, everyone can attack them saying they're going to raise, the retirement age for guys.
It's just that particular, I mean, they're going to get attacked for raising retirement. That's what they're dying for. So I don't know whether that issue matters that much anymore. I mean, the spousal benefits are kind of fading away at the high end. I mean, literally,
I'm not just saying that though. I'm saying the whole thing. It was like just as bad politics. I'm like sitting there thinking you're giving yourself these open to be attacked on stuff that you're not even.
It's the good politics results in the largest tax increase in history.
I don't know if I agree with that, man. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think the good politics.
Promising is the good politics is to say we're never going to cut benefits. there's no extra money. I hate to break it to people.
But your proposal that you did with Alicia Manel, why not look at something like, see what I'm saying? So so there are
that's a popular proposal. Just for background, the proposal with Alicia Manel, she is an econ professor at Boston College, and she's not far left, but she's
left. Absolutely.
I'm right of center. We disagree about a lot. We argue about things, but we both agree that the federal tax preference for retirement plans really doesn't do anything. It doesn't really increase retirement savings very much. It doesn't go to people who need it. So, and that's a ton of money. It's 180 billion a year. So we say, okay, use that to help Social Security. Fine. If that's what people are going to do, I'll say it's nice if two people from across the aisle come together and come up with an idea the other 350 million Americans hate. But your whole financial industry is against this. But let's say you can't do that. And let's just say you got to raise taxes. I mean, it's people deluding themselves. They're like, oh, well, if we cut off Ukraine, it's the scale of the money is completely different. People waste, fraud, and abuse. We've got some people stealing disability. The scale is so entirely different. By come 2034, when you're gonna, the trust fund runs out. If you don't want to cut benefit, you got to come with extra money. In that year, you got to come up with $360 billion in today's dollars. And in the following year, you got to come up with it again plus more, and then the next year more. It's where are you going to get the money? You are going to raise taxes. So this is the point of we are where we are. If we had tackled this 20 years ago, 30 years ago, let's say 20 years ago when Bush went about it, we could have had reforms that phased in over time and made the system solvent without raising taxes and without impoverishing people. We can make the system work. But for political reasons, people say, oh, I don't want to do it, so let's kick the can. And they do it again. They do it again. They do it again. So 20 years later, you're at the point where we don't have any easy options anymore. And now you're at the point where people are scared and they're saying, oh, I'm never going to cut benefits. I couldn't do that. Okay, then be honest the way the Democrats are being honest and say we're going to have a massive tax increase.
Or why not just go in the general fund? That's what I don't. What's the?
Okay, then you need a massive tax increase to do that. You can't
do you though? I mean, apparently you don't, because we have deficits as far back as freaking FDR. We never pay off the debt, so it's kind of like. I mean, I think it's
just borrow. Seriously, it's.
But when can you? So we got 34 trillion in debt right now. We've been borrowing from ourselves essentially, and the gravy train
and the Chinese. Yeah. Here's the deal: if the proposal was, okay, come 2034, we're just going to borrow the money. That's your financial crisis. Boom, you're done.
But they've been saying that for decades.
It is. The scale of it is such that something like that would be clearly unaffordable, and there's no end to it. It's not like we're going to borrow a couple of years while something else phases in. There's no end to it. Yeah. So if you want to say what is going to trigger a financial crisis, that's going to be it. And I spent the last 8 years of my life working on what's called a financial oversight board for Puerto Rico, which went bankrupt in 2016. You get somebody involved in doing it. And those are situations where Greece is the same. They could borrow and borrow and borrow right up to the end. They're rolling over their debt, but then something flips, and the market's like, we're not gonna get repaid. And if you start saying we're gonna borrow the entire amount, you're done. And there's a paper reads.
The difference between Puerto Rico is they don't control their own currency. Then Greece,
but Social Security. Think where your cost drivers are. Social Security benefits are inflation adjusted. You can't inflate your way out of that. Medicare benefits are a service.
Right.
So you have to provide the service. You can't get out of that with inflation. Plus, if your strategies were going to inflate away your money, again, financial crisis, it's at some point you got to balance your books.
I'm not sure. So what I'm saying with Greece, so they were part of the EU, so they couldn't. I mean, because they got part of the EU, that's
Puerto Rico and Greece had the same thing. They couldn't devalue. But
exactly.
Okay, if your strategies were to devalue, that's the same as inflation, basically.
But I'm not sure those things are. I don't think it's X equals Y there. Then I'm not advocating necessarily just put on the general fund and borrow. My whole point is
we've been freaking borrowing. Look at the military defense. I mean, man, we don't have. Where's the money coming to pay for that? I mean, no, it seems weird to me that everyone's saying Social Security is this one thing that has to be solved, but everything else, man, we could have the FDA, the CDC, NASA, Defense Department. All those are running perpetual deficits, and no one talks about those things.
Is the way Social Security is set up, and look, if say something like the Australian pension system is general revenue finance, I'm fine going with general revenue financing of kind of a safety net type thing, if it's affordable. But Social Security is set up to be a self-financing system because they want to look like earned benefits.
Yeah, I understand.
And look, politically speaking, that's been powerful for Social Security because the reason it's so tough to reduce benefits, even for high-income people who don't need them, is they think they've earned. Now, I did another piece in the Journal a couple of months ago where I pointed out for even people retiring today didn't in fact pay for their benefits. They're getting more than they paid back plus interest.
Big time.
But we're telling them, and I had quotes from Biden and Trump, you've earned your benefits, you paid them. So this moral thing. So that's kind of why it's set up that way. But it's, in a sense, I don't care. But my point is you can't just add another $360 billion a year to the budget deficit. There's a paper done by folks at Wharton. It's called a Wharton budget model. And they do a lot of very sophisticated economic model. And they wrote a piece within the last 6 months, basically asking how long do we have before we have a financial crisis? And they thought around 20 years, I think on the outside. But it's really, you say, what is, with all these things, there's, what's the trigger? It's like a bank run. What triggers people to lose confidence and get their money out? And with something like this, saying we're simply not going to fix Social Security and borrow, that's your trigger. I mean, if that were going to be the policy, to be honest, I would take all my retirement money and shift it out of the country today.
You do what with it?
I would shift all my retirement money out of the country today.
And you'd put it to where? Well, I mean, all countries are in debt.
Australia. Balanced budget, low debt.
The fascists who run Australia, you know what I'm saying?
Invest in kangaroo farms or something. But my point is just you can't. I mean, if you're holding a lot of money in dollars and we're playing footsie with a financial crisis, that's a huge threat to people. So
I don't trust these Harvard guys as far as I can kick them. I mean, if we just look back 20 years ago, man. I mean, if 30 years ago, there's the retirement crisis. Even during Reagan, we're gonna have massive tax hikes. I wrote about this in one of my books. I think it's this book right here. Yeah, right here. One of my books, Relax and Retire. We're gonna have massive tax hikes because the Reagan military spending and all this. And I'm not saying it's not gonna happen. I don't know, Andrew. I just think all these guys that think, they have all the numbers and they say all this econometric stuff. I was like, yeah, but you guys are wrong. Hell, what one of those guys, was it John Kenneth Galbraith, that I think it was him, who said, economists makes the people, who's the ones who do the living by the stars, whatever those people are called. Astrologers. Economists make astrologists seem legitimate or something. I thought that was one of the funniest quotes, man.
It's sort of, how big a risk do you want to take? But, we had my first job when I worked in DC was the banking committee. We were dealing with the Asian financial crisis.
Yes.
Then you had Greece, you had, Puerto Rico's a smaller scale thing. You can't borrow forever.
Well, that's the issue, though. But what I'm trying to say is we are doing that over on the general fund. And I'm like, everyone just focus on this one thing that we're all relying on for retirement. I'm like, well, why is no? And I'm not asking you to say, hey,
but I guess my point is, if you can't keep borrowing everything within the general fund, which we shouldn't be doing. I mean, it's the economy is pretty strong. If you're thinking you want balanced budget over the business cycle or something, then now's the time we should be running surpluses because the economy is pretty strong, but we're not. But
and it never will.
My point is, if you want to fix the general budget side, through tax increase or spending cuts or whatever, but then borrow for Social Security or whatever, fine. I get it. All nets out. The problem is your players going forward are Social Security, Medicare, and debt service. It's
defense is a number. Don't forget, defense is a high.
There is, what is defense as a percentage of GDP, and it's
one of the top 4 line items. Though. It was big.
it is, but it's not. I mean, historically, it's not big. And I'll just, I mean, I don't want to be selling some sort of authority, but it's, I relatives who are, career military people are saying, if you want us to do what you want us to be able to do, then we're having a tough time. Planes are all beat up and stuff. So it's, and the way I think about it is, having a national defense is something a country should have. And you can argue about what our foreign policy should be. But look, you should have every country's got a military, and it should be competent to do what you want to do. Paying ever increasing retirement benefits to the richest retirees on earth doesn't strike me as in the same category. So if I said, okay, I can have, a defense that is competent for us, or, more of these benefits of rich retirees, I mean, the choice for me is kind of obvious.
I don't think I don't think it's mutually exclusive that you have to have a military that's the fourth largest line item, and you're losing your competency if you don't. I frankly think I don't get that. So I'm like, you could easily reduce the military budget by 10% and still have a very competent, strong military for sure. And that would save a lot of money annually. And what I would do as a conservative libertarian, I'd say 10% cut to the Department of Education, NASA, all these things get a 10% cut across the board. You know what I'm saying? We don't have to go to the general fund to tackle Social Security. But if we're going to be worried about budget deficits leading to more and more debt, it can't just be this focus, in my opinion, all on Social Security while these other things are running rampant.
Yeah, the focus you get on Social Security is because it's perceived as a self-funding system.
I agree.
They set themselves up. Medicare is a little bit of that, but there's always this out. So Social Security is unique in people wanting it to be balanced. Let's say that. But again, you're thinking the scale. If you cut defense by 10%, okay, that's real money, but I think that's not going to get you very close in Social Security.
Well, I'm actually talking about if we don't want to go insolvent, which we already are essentially, you know what I'm saying, in terms of the federal debt burden and all that, because going back to your Harvard business people, when does the financial crisis kick in 20 years from now? Well, hopefully people are saying it's not just all Social Security. There's some other spending. I guess where I'm going is the politics is really what bothers me at the Republican study group. I'm like, dude, you need better politics. You know what I'm saying? And we have to be able to sell this.
They're squeezing everything. If you look at, it's not like they just put out a Social Security plan. They put out a full budget. And if you look at the rest of their budget, again, I'm not a political person. I think they cut the rest of the budget by even more, and more than is politically plausible. And still, they've got to go after Social Security. So the budget deficit is big. It's a real problem. But when you look at the rest of the budget, your sort of discretionary spending is getting smaller and smaller because Social Security, Medicare, and debt service are getting bigger and bigger. So there's this public purpose of what do you want the government to do, but then there's just this point of it's the Willie Horton, the bank robbers. It's he robs banks. That's where the money is. Entitlement is where the money is, because you can't unless you want to default on the debt, you can't get to the debt service. So it's just there's stuff you can do on the healthcare end.
We spend right now, my man Tom says we spend $811 billion on HHS, 741 on Social Security, 653 Department of Treasury, and 410 on Department of Defense. So that I just real quick, Andrew, someone had.
Let's just take that number. I'm assuming it's correct. Let's say you take 10% off the Department of Defense. You use that to fill your Social Security gap, which in 2034. So that would give you $41 billion. So 2034, you need $360 billion.
Right.
It's just too much money.
But 2034 is in. I assume that'd be inflated dollars. Right?
No,
so
it's in today's dollars.
Okay, so that's that gives us $40 billion right there, and then we go back to other proposals like what you and Alicia were talking about.
Yeah.
I would actually get rid of all charitable deductions because only the very, very few people itemize. I'd get rid of all charitable deductions. You see what I'm saying? And then on top of that, it's not just the Department of Defense we eliminate 10%. It's all the other crap that goes with it.
There isn't the money.
Oh, what?
How much the education department get? And I don't know these numbers off the top.
I don't know, but I'm just saying
it's nothing compared to Social Security. This is Social Security is $1.3 trillion a year.
Yeah, but what you do is you say, okay, so here's half, we'll just use that. And how are we going to get the other? Well, we raised the payroll tax by, let's see, like Larry Kolikoff wrote the other day. Someone asked my man, I forgot his name, Mark, asked how much you need to raise the payroll tax. And it was from 12.4 to 17% is what Kolikoff said. So that's a 40% increase in the payroll tax. And that's without, getting rid of the wage limits and all that too. That'd be about $100. If you're making $100,000 a year, that'd be $100 roughly, $90 per paycheck if you got paid 24 times a year. So that'd be a big increase in taxes. But I don't think it's
the Social Security tax is already the biggest tax most Americans pay.
Yeah, but they're getting a big benefit for it too, though. You see what I'm saying? I think the benefit that you're getting.
The question is why it's. But just to touch back on your thing about we can cut other things. The Education Department's budget this year, last year, is 1.3 billion.
How much?
1.3. So eliminate it. Just
wait. I'm all for it. Eliminate the Department of Education.
Okay, but here's the thing. Okay, so call it $1 billion. Just for
you're saying the Department of Education's budget's only 1.3 billion.
That's what.
I don't know about that, man. It seems awful low to me. But let's keep going.
If you need 360 billion for Social Security in 2034 annually, okay. If we can eliminate the Department of Education 360 times per year, it's just the money is okay. The Defense Department's got a lot of money. But even it is small compared to Social Security. Social Security is 1.4 trillion this year, something like that. So if you're at 400 for defense, is a lot.
I don't think it's that high. My man says Social Security is 653 billion is what my man. 741 billion is what my man says here, Tom.
It's about double
that. But either way, what I'm saying is, I think though you're building blocks on things. You're saying we're going to cut back on some of our crazy spending. We're going to raise a little bit of taxes on the payroll tax. We're going to get rid of the 401k deductions like you guys talked about. And all of a sudden, money starts.
But it's getting rid of the 401k deduction. That if you can get that largely does it for you.
Yes.
Because it's a look, I'm fine with doing it if I can convince people to do with it. If you do that, you don't need the rest. If you don't get rid of the 401k tax deduction, the rest is going to be very.
Yeah, 100%.
My point on the Social Security part is just if you don't want to cut benefits, as a responsible leader, you should propose the tax increases. If you don't want to raise taxes, then you should propose the benefit cuts.
But why are the Republicans, at least, I think a lot of people would be open to paying more payroll tax as long as there are other things that are going with it, Andrew. See, that's why I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of the Republicans, but just the political nature of this is just like, and I'm a right winger. I don't have any qualm saying that at all, but just like politically, Republicans, this is a winning issue because your base, which is essentially small business owners and middle and lower income people, that is a Republican base who are relying heavily on Social Security. I'm like, do something to make this solvent. And the way to do it is, I think a lot of us would say, no, I'd be willing to pay a little bit more payroll tax as long as there's a reason to do that. I don't want to fund illegal immigrants. I don't want to fund Israel. I don't want to fund Ukraine. But if I get a benefit myself, I'd get that as long as there's other things that go with it. It's not just on my back, if that makes sense. And it's just.
You are one to pay it, then you pay it. Of course, you could also say, just cut my benefits and I'll pay the difference to myself. I'd much rather cut my benefits.
Right. No, I get that. That's a good argument.
And so you have that, but it's just, do people, if raising the payroll tax rate were politically attractive, we would have done it already. Traditionally, that was how we addressed, funding gaps. The payroll tax rate started at 2%, then house at 12%.
Right.
So we did that, but at a certain point, people said we don't want to do this anymore, and there's good reason for it. It's just a funding a pay-as-you-go system. Think of
a lot of things.
Your textbook econ of what makes the economy grow is essentially more labor, more people working, more capital. You're investing more, so they have tools and research or whatever. Well, if you're taxing people for Social Security, they're going to work less because they view it as a tax. They don't view it as a contribution. And so that's going to reduce labor supply, hurt your economy. But then there's also very clear evidence that people substitute Social Security benefits against private savings. So if you say we're going to tax you more so we can pay you more, they're going to save less. So you're going to have less capital too. So you're going to have less labor, less capital. Well, that's not doing much for your economy. And I mean, CBO has looked at plans that would, address Social Security that way, and they do project lower economic growth. So again, it's all like for what? I can devise you a plan that protects low and middle income people. What I can't do is keep paying $96,000 or $125,000 in the future while having any sort of reasonable tax burden. Because what do we do on Medicare? I mean, that's not fixing itself either.
Well, that's why I completely agree that Medicare is.
Social Security is the easy fix. Just cut benefits for rich people. Set up a universal 401k or something so people can save. Cut benefits for rich people. That's fixed. Trying to fix Medicare is so difficult because it's such a screwed up. The whole healthcare system is all screwed up. You have all different players. It's politically impossible. So that's where you're going to need your revenue.
Medicare is the freaking nightmare, man. I mean,
but it's just a tough. If you're one of these guys who's taken the point of view, we've earned our benefits, blah blah blah. Okay, if you want to view the system that way, then you got an obligation to say how you're going to fix the system. And so, I kind of take. Biden has said, well, I would do a little bit, but it wouldn't really do very much. He doesn't want to cut benefits. He'll raise some taxes on rich people, do a little bit, but not fix it. Trump's saying, I don't want to cut benefits, but he won't say anything. And this is just not leadership. These are important issues, and people deserve better than what they're getting.
No, I completely agree with that. I call Social Security Fort Knox compared to Medicare, because Medicare is like insolvent, like right now.
Social Security is a fixable entitlement. Medicare, you're not. And Social Security, if you say, you go and you say, we're going to dial up the retirement age, well, okay, they dial it up, and then what's going to happen. The Medicare stuff is way more complicated. They get concerned over Medicare costs. We're going to cut the billing rate for doctors. Well, they just perform more procedures. It's really hard.
No, it'll be worse. There won't be. So this is what. So this person says we need to regulate healthcare better because it's so unregulated right now. Like, oh my goodness, if we had more if they reduce the reimbursement rates to doctors, you're going to have less doctors and you're going to have longer lines to get your hip replacement, like in these single payer systems. Not you, Andrew, but these people who love their Canadian and England healthcare, NHS. Good luck getting a knee replacement. Good luck getting a hip replacement. It's going to take you forever. Oh, and by the way, you're in pain that whole time. Good luck with that. That's why so many Canadians come south of the border to get our health care, because it's not a nationalized system.
I guess the way I put it, I lived in the UK, when I was younger, and this is not a time to use a lot of health care. But at that point, the UK was, okay, it's not as deluxe as ours or whatever. They're spending like 10% of GDP less than us in health care. So somebody said to me, would you take the UK system plus a tax cut equal to 10% of GDP? I would take it. Because we're on healthcare, we're so far beyond the point of diminishing returns. There's huge amounts of waste. The issue, and I'm not a healthcare healthcare expert. The issue on the healthcare side is something has to govern the operations. You either have market discipline doing it, competitive markets, or you need to have regulation. To be honest, you're right with a lot of regulations. We don't really have a very competitive healthcare market. What we have is a whole series of local monopolies. Your hospital system, they're a monopoly. Your pharmacy, they're a monopoly on this, whatever device. So it's not really a competitive system the way grocery stores or something are.
Yes. Oh, no.
We also don't, it's just, you say, why are pharmaceuticals so much more expensive in the U.S.? Well, because the healthcare system, Medicare says you have to provide it if the doctor wants it. We basically pay whatever they ask for. Well, okay, it's just so we neither have a strong enough market nor strong enough regulation. And at some point you want to get on top of that, but the problem is every single group operating it has lobbyists. This is much tougher than Social Security because they're all lobbying for their different angles.
And they're making so much money, Andrew. These hospital administrators are making bank. Where does that money come from? It's come from us. And it's just, It's ridiculous. And this is anyway. I know we've been on here for an hour. I'll get you out of here. I just so my man here, right quick, you'll get a kick out of this. John Hobbs. This is Thomas Hobbs, Calvin and Hobbs' dad. He says, "I'm Canadian. You have to save for retirement. We have 4 levels of government pension, along with a list of subsidies for low income, especially for nursing homes." I would love it, and just on a closing note, I'll let you get the last word. If we could go back in time, I would have never voted for Social Security if I was in 1935, if I was in the Senate. But it is here. It's inevitable, and it's so ingrained in the system, almost like Obamacare now. It's never going away. And so I would love if they said, we're going to reduce your taxes, and then we're going to have a minimum level of benefit. But the issue is that for someone who's, my oldest daughter is 23, all right? That's different than someone who's 45 and 50. And this is, again, my issue with the Republicans isn't necessarily their stupid proposal. It's that they have left themselves up to be battered on both sides from people from the right like me who says, you're going to be so vague, you're going to allow yourself to be hit, and no one's going to take it seriously. Why not just be specific and say, if you're under the age of 30, we're going to raise your retirement. Under the age of 20, it'd be better because those people aren't really voting anyway. But my goodness, you've got to win politically in order to enact these kind of things. And I almost wonder if the Republican Party is like the Washington Generals, like the Harlem Globetrotters. You knew for a fact if you went to see the Globetrotters, the Washington Generals will lose. I kind of feel like the Republican Party is that bad in terms of just.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I guess one thing I'd say for the political prospects for Republicans and Social Security is, Democrats will be clear about what they want to do. They'll say we want to fix the entire thing by raising taxes on the top 1%, which is not economically viable. But they'll say what they want to do. They won't, in fact, do it. Back when President Biden came in, they had both houses of Congress and the presidency. Yep. They had, at that point, they had literally 90% of House Democrats co-sponsoring a bill with massive tax increases. Yep. And the congressman who's the lead guy, the sponsors, oh, we're going to get it out of committee, bring it to the floor, get a vote on it. They didn't get anywhere on it. Yep. And because they know that large tax increases are unpopular. Americans are kind of funny in the sense of, even progressive Americans, that they want all the things that you get. They want all the benefits they get in Europe, but they don't want to pay the taxes you get in Europe. So they're not people say, oh, they're like European socialists. They're really not. No. They just want the benefits, but they want somebody else to pay for it. If you talk to Europeans, they're like, look, I like the benefits, I'll pay for it. But so they know that this isn't going to play for them. So they're in a better position than Republicans politically, but they're not unassailable on this. So you see how it plays out. But I do think it's hurt Republicans not to do something in this issue.
No, I completely agree.
Absolutely. Literally every day, 10,000 baby boomers switch from taxpayers in the system to retirees collecting money out of it. You don't think that changes the politics of it? You're crazy. Right. So looking back on the Bush stuff, which is now almost 20 years ago, Republicans should have said we're going to cut whatever deal we have to cut now to get it done now. Yep. Because every day that goes by is going to be worse for us, and it is going to be worse. If we could have cut a deal then, half tax increases, half benefit cuts, we're probably not going to get that deal. You're probably 75% tax increases, something like that. Because it just, the politics work against you. It's shifted left within the Democratic Party, clearly, and the Republican Party shifted to the left. The whole thing is shifted to the left.
100%,
so
man.
Getting something that is fiscally responsible is a lot harder now.
It'd be harder. And like I always say, you don't like the Republicans now, just wait 10 years. They're going to be like Democrats today. So, every 10 years, the Republicans
this is the first election I can think of, at least in my sort of adult lifetime, where the positions of the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate on Social Security are virtually identical. If you had gone back to the last one, McCain and Obama, or all that stuff, very different positions on Social Security, they are now identical. Yeah. And so
the Democrats won. That's what I'm saying. The Democrats won because
so it's all over the crying. But then you're going to have to figure out, if you're a Republican, you want to save your vestige of pride. I mean, the difficult thing for Republicans is Trump saying we don't want to cut benefits. At some point, you have to raise taxes. That's going to be humiliating for Republicans. It's going to be humiliating for them. And so it's going to be a very, very tough time when they're going to have to roll over on this.
They remember Walter Mondale. Remember Walter Mondale speaking? Reagan's going to raise taxes. I'm going to raise taxes. He'll say he won't, but I just did. You know what I'm saying? And then he lost 49 states, only won Minnesota, his home state, by 5,000 votes. So Republicans say, we're not raising tax on nobody. Democrats say they're going to raise taxes, but then when it comes down to it, are they actually going to do it when people get the pay decrease? I just don't know. But all right, Andrew. So we got an article coming out the Wall Street Journal. Andrew writes on American Enterprise Institute. Where else can people find you? Are you doing you got like your own personal blog or anything like that on your drumming skills?
I used to do it, but it's mostly I'll write for Forbes. So it's Forbes.com or whatever. AEI.org is the website. On Twitter, it's Biggs AG, which my wife pointed out to me, that's Big Sag. But what do you do? If it's true,
man. It's looking up Andrew Biggs and that guy from the Congress guy from Arizona. It's like, that's not the guy I want. I want my Andrew. You know what I'm saying?
I get texts all the time. People are like, oh, you gotta stand up for something. I'm like, you got the wrong Andy Biggs. And then they'll email me back. And I'm like, no, really, you got the wrong guy. I met him, nice guy. But I'm like, he's a different guy.
Isn't like an actor named Andrew Biggs too? Like some actor? The guy, I think it's an actor named Andrew Biggs.
What's that guy? No, Jason Biggs from America.
Jason, that's what it was. Jason.
But I'm not, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not related.
Right on, man. Andrew, I appreciate you being here. This is good stuff. Good. By the way, and Andrew's on Twitter, which the reason I signed up for Twitter is so I could follow Andrew, by the way. So just keep posting stuff there, man. And I appreciate you being on board here tonight for sure.
Happy to do it.
Thanks, man. I'm going to stay on board, guys. So, Andrew, just hop off whenever you want, man.
All right.
I appreciate it. God bless, Andrew. Much obliged. Really.
Hey,
Thanks, man.
Thank you, everybody.
You got it, man. Good stuff. So that was Andrew.